Hey there troops, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and today I want to talk about planes in Battlefield. Now, this does heavily relate to Battlefield 5, but it also relates to Battlefield 1, and even some previous Battlefields as well. And the reason I think we need to discuss this is because I feel as though planes are a really odd place right now. They're in a very odd place as a component of Battlefield that doesn't really seem to fit in anywhere, and doesn't really seem to contribute much. Now, on a very basic note, of course, planes provide indirect and direct fire support, they'll blow up stuff, it's easy to get kills with them in some respects, and they will clear a path in an objective. But in terms of actually contributing on the whole, they don't really do all that much. And I think we really need to start talking about how to incorporate planes in a much more positive environment and a way that will actually be beneficial to the gameplay that we see in Battlefield 5. And I think there are two parts of this. One, the fact that planes don't contribute to objectives, and two, they don't exactly fit in. So let's talk about this. What exactly can be done? Now, I think this issue has shown up in the past two games, Battlefield 5 and 1 namely, because we've lost helicopters. Now, helicopters in Battlefield were always an aerial vehicle that was strong, but also capable of contributing to objectives by flying relatively low. You could capture an objective in a helicopter relatively easily, but that isn't the case in planes. That's never been something that they were really capable of doing. And now that we've lost helicopters and their ability to fire tow missiles and cannons and things like that, you know, we're really struggling now to find a place where these things fit in and actually play an active role in the objectives that we're taking. So part 1, planes not contributing to objectives. I feel this can be solved by a system of quadrants. I think the game requires airspace to be capturable around objectives, and I think the airspace needs to be large enough that planes can maneuver inside of these zones and contribute to the objectives that they're capturing. Now, of course, the key issue with that is that we have the overall capture zone on the ground, and of course the airspace capture zone would have to be significantly larger. And I think this can be done relatively easily. I think all you really need is a slightly faded version of a capture zone to make it apparent or clear that airspace capture zone is larger than the actual on-the-ground capture zone that you're walking into, be it like dashed lines or, you know, some kind of fade effect, just some kind of HUD map element that makes it clear that the airspace capture zone is bigger than the on-the-ground one. And I think this will really add to the dynamic of planes in a lot of ways. So first and foremost, it makes them have the ability to capture objectives, and it means that, you know, these planes will contribute more to the objectives that they're seeing, meaning that they can fly around them more, meaning that there's more dogfights, more engagements, there's more decision making as well. So no longer is it just a simple case of I'm going to choose a Spitfire because I want to blow up other planes, I'm going to be a bomber because I want to blow up people, or I want to be an attack plane because I want to do the best of both worlds. This capture quadrant idea actually gives people more variety and choice in the air, because if you're a bomber, of course, you won't really be able to spin round and capture the air zone. You know, you'll have to be indirect or direct fire support that can kind of slowly feed into the objective as it flies through. If you're a fighter, of course, you know, your job is to secure the airspace above an objective. You know, you'll be taking on bombers. If you're an attack plane, well, you might have the best of both worlds in that situation. And I think that kind of diversity means that these three kinds of planes all have very different roles all of a sudden. You know, it's not just simply a case of choosing these planes because, you know, you're worried about what else is up in the sky. It's choosing these planes because you're consciously thinking about what's on the ground and what you can contribute towards objectives. And another way I really think this improves things is simply that, you know, pilots don't necessarily get a lot of recognition in the game, be it in points, definitely in kills, because of course the bombing runs, when it was unbalanced, were quite easy, but ultimately they don't get that objective contribution. You know, if you make a bombing run in an objective that you're in the airspace in, you should get some kind of bonus. And of course, if, you know, you're a fighter jet taking out planes above objectives, you know, you should be able to get that kind of recognition as well. And the big thing here that I think changes everything is the disconnect, and this is part 2 of what I was talking about. The problem in Battlefield 5, and we find this with tanks, but more specifically with planes, and more heavily with planes, is that they're either considered too overpowered or too underpowered. And the reason that changes a lot is just due to the fact that some people will engage with planes and some people won't from the ground. Like, at the moment, if you're in a plane, how many people are really going to look up? How many people are going to bother with an AA? How many people are actually going to think, ooh, that's a plane in the air, I should probably do something about it? Chances are that's quite small, and in other chances it might be even larger. Other people might actually be more actively aware of what you're doing if you're a bombing, for example. But I don't think that happens enough. There's no consistency to it, and I think that's why we get such varied comments about the state of planes in Battlefield 5 and why people want them to be powerful or less powerful in the game, because they're constantly having very different experiences about what they're doing with these planes, how many people are really challenging them in the sky and on the ground. But if we divide it into quadrants, we now have the ability to go, ooh, you know, how about there is a plane here? You know, there could be a HUD element that kind of tells you that there's a capture zone in the sky that's being contested and a capture zone on the ground. And I know this sounds complicated, but you've got to bear this in mind. If planes all of a sudden do actually contribute towards objectives, people are actually going to start thinking about them. People are going to start attacking them. People are going to start, you know, firing at planes. And because of that, because everybody has that conscious awareness that we need to be, you know, thinking about what planes are doing on our objectives because they actually have a zone capture, it means that people will fire at them more, and we can get a much consistent balancing consensus with where these planes should be. You know, do they need more armor? Do they need more power? What is it that they're looking for? And I think that's because it comes with the fact that every soldier is engaged with what's in the sky. So I think that's a really big idea. You know, a good idea for modes like Conquest. I think it's going to be quite difficult in some ways and in some modes to really try and get that sort of plane quadrant idea up and going with the sort of airspace. But I really think this is something that could change Battlefield for the better. I think it makes pilots more involved, I think it rewards them more, but it also gives us a much better consensus of how planes should be balanced and tackled because everybody is aware of what's going on. So troops, that's about it for it today. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Do you see any hurdles with this idea? Do you agree with it? If you're a pilot yourself, more specifically, you know, is this something that you're on board with? As always, folks, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you again in the comment section below.